Good morning. How are you doing? You okay? Yeah? Is anyone staying nice and warm? It's a bit colder. It's dropped a little bit, hasn't it? We do put the heating on here, just try and not right at the beginning of September. So, for a couple of weeks, we've got to tough it out, okay? But we've had a warm summer, though, haven't we? So it's getting used to it. So, with the seasonal shift, and a lot of people, life changes this time of year, where people are going back to school or starting back at work, and it's always a bit of a seasonal shift at church as well. And I suppose every time we gear into a new season, we have to remind ourselves of just some of the things that comes with being in a new season. Because if we don't embrace the new season, then we can miss what God's doing right in front of us, can't we? Because if we're constantly looking for the things he did before, then we might miss what he's doing today. So this is just some real foundational, how do we approach new seasons? We like to ask this question, but who likes change here? It gets harder to answer that question. Sometimes we say, well, it depends on the change. It's, as I get, and hopefully I'm still fairly young, but as I get older, change can be difficult because we do get into our patterns and we get into our habits, and these routines, they can really help us. But we always have to be open to new things, right? Now, this is a big scripture. I wanted to read this one out. This is 2 Timothy 4:3-5. It says, "The time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine, but you keep your head, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, and fulfill your ministry." So we've got Paul. He's writing this letter to Timothy. And scholars say at the time, they think Paul, he was in captivity. So that's sort of the lens we're looking at it from. He's not in an amazing place himself, but he's writing these instructions to Timothy. And he himself, you could say, is in quite a difficult position, right? And he says that the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine, and that they'll have itching ears, it says. And I wonder, what does that mean to us? Does anyone like to hear what you want to hear? Depends. If you've got an option, someone's just going to tell you something that makes you feel good. That yeah, I want to hear this. This is going to big me up. Or you've got something that maybe it's accurate, but you might not. I don't know if I'm going to receive that too well. Does that make sense? And it says, look, there will be a time where people they'll have these itching ears. They'll want to seek out people who will just simply tell them what they want to hear. They'll confirm them in a way on the path they've really already selected in their mind. And now it's about finding someone to affirm me in that decision. So, and I think this is a time we live in that is so easy in some sense, but so difficult. Because we've looked at this before, like with the globalization, with the access to internet and even AI now, we could probably find some kind of teacher or some kind of rhetoric out there to affirm us in whatever position we want to take. Is that fair? So that can get really difficult, because if you can find a legitimate source that's going to affirm you, then how are we to stick to what is true? And for us, I suppose we always have to come back to the Bible. And we have to approach it with discernment and with prayer, because indeed we can find different viewpoints on different scriptures, but we have to bring everything back to God. In all of this information we have, we've got to make sure we're not just people that are wanting to come and hear simply what we want to hear. That makes sense? And in a new season, sometimes we have to do that, because change can be difficult. It can be difficult if a church changes. It can be difficult when we change a job, or when we change our environment. These things are difficult, and we don't just want to gloss over them and say, change, get on board with it, because it is tough. It's tough, and it has a big impact on us. When we had our first kid, Judah, you've seen him running around, you know him. You don't quite realize the change that is going to come into your life. And obviously, it's amazing, and you love them. But I remember thinking back, and I don't think I'd really appreciated just how much my life was going to change. Because you see other people with a baby or a kid, and you sort of just view them as an extension. It's just an addition. It's like, oh, it's still, Matt and Esther. Now there's a baby. And they're still the same. Everything's still the same. And like, the baby's only small. It's not going to take up much room. It's only small. We'll just put him over there, put him in the corner. No, we just did not. We didn't. I mean, we had an idea of it, but the reality of it is something different. And now, obviously, that is a positive thing for us in most ways. Sometimes maybe at 3 a.m. in the morning, you kind of have that moment. But it's a positive thing. That's a positive change. But it's a huge impact. Because before, I say this, I joke to Esther, I say, what did we used to do all day? Like on a Saturday or something like that. What did we do? Because our time was our own. Does that make sense? We didn't have to think about anything else or anyone else before we make a decision. Now, everything has to go through the lens of, how does this affect the kids? Can we do this? Will there be babysitters? You get what I'm saying, don't you? It's a big change. And really, it's everywhere. If we want to grow, if we want to advance, change will always come. And sometimes God treats us in a different way as we change, as we get older. And if we're not looking for that, we miss it. We won't treat Judah the same way that we treated him when he was a year old. Then we won't treat him the same way when he's 10. That makes sense? Or when he's 15 or 20. We get that because the love is the same. The love is exactly the same, but the way it is expressed comes through a lens of change because he's changed, his dynamics changed, his age has changed. And sometimes for us, we're thinking, okay, God, where are you in this? Because I remember back in the old days, God, where you were just right there with me. Like you were in the thick of it. Like I remember that. That was, God, where are you now? And sometimes it's just that change has come. The love is exactly the same, but the way it is expressed, he's still right there with you. But maybe before you were 1, and now you're 3, or now you're 5, or now you're 10. Does that make sense? So we need to keep our eyes open for this. And when we were back at Bible college, this was a big point. Like you've heard me say it before, but they drilled this into us, okay? I just don't know if I've still quite got it, but it's something we always need. And it said, point 1 is to always have a teachable heart. How important is that? For teachers in the room, is a teachable heart important? What is the opposite? If someone's got an unteachable heart, if someone has an unteachable spirit, what does that bring to mind? You think, oh, I'm trying to tell you something. I'm trying to show you the way. And what are you picturing? Like, no, or in one ear, out the other. They would always tell us to have a teachable heart, and it's not just a good sound bites, because this comes back to roots of humility. And we always have that contrast in the Bible between the Pharisees, who I know can often get a bad rep, and maybe they kind of deserve that, but we always have this example. You've got the Pharisees who, they had everything together. From our earthly eyes, we may think, from an earthly point of view, we may think I would have rather been in their position. Because they had everything sorted out. They had security. They had a certain level of influence and wealth. They didn't have to worry as much. They had more power and social standing in the community. But we're often given this point of view that for the most part, they just were not teachable. Not all of them. It's a generalization. But they just were not teachable. And Jesus contrasts that with people we looked at last week. Who are the people he chose? Not the most special, not the most incredible. He picked the people who were willing, the people who simply said, I'm open to this. I'm going to come on board. He picked the fishermen, the shepherds, the tax collectors, sometimes the outcasts of society. But all of those people, they had, for the most part, a teachable heart. It was a difference. It wasn't a heart of, I don't need anything. I already know this. This doesn't add anything to me. It was a heart of, there's something going on here. There's something, I need to learn more about this. And for me, when I look out at, the universe, space. If you know me, I'm quite interested in space and that kind of stuff, because for me, it just gives me such a reminder that we are so small. We're so loved, we're so massive in a way in the eyes of God, but we are so small through the lens of the universe, through the lens of eternity, that even if you're coming at it from a non-Christian perspective, I still think, how can anyone come to the opinion that we just have all the answers figured out? I think when we just look up into the night sky, there is so much out there that we don't understand. I think it's humbling to an extent. You think, okay, there is so much going on. How can anyone come to the point where they're so confident in their own idea of what is taking place in the world? But does that make sense? That some new information comes along every now and again, and it just changes the way we view the world and the universe. And for me, I ground that in a Christian, in a theist point of view. Because I understand when Scripture says that God's ways they're higher than our ways. As far as the heavens are from the earth, that is how much higher his ways are. And though I can get a lot of frustration with that, because I like to know things, I like the answers. If I could have some answers right now, I wish I could. Does anyone have a question that if you could ask one question of God right now, would you like that answer? See, I like to know things, but sometimes we just have to approach things with that humble heart and say, even if I never get the answer in this lifetime, I must remain teachable. The word says that we are the clay, that we're the living clay, that he's the potter. And I think what we see again and again throughout the Bible and through humanity, even today, is there's this big thing where people, we try and shape God in our image. Does that make sense? You see that? Like maybe we've got a narrative, or maybe we've got an agenda that we need to put forward, and sometimes there's this temptation, or what we see in the world is we will then shape the view of God through the lens of that narrative, of that agenda, through those values. And the Bible is really clear from day one, isn't it? It says that we are made in his image. And it sets that hierarchy really clearly. But it's an interesting pattern because we observe it again and again. We are the clay. You are the potter. Isaiah 64:8. So how would we say, if you had to assess your level of clay today? And this is all, we're all in the same boat, because I think sometimes oh man, I'm really teachable in one area, and then another area of life, I think, I need to be a bit more open with that. I need to be a bit more humble. I think my clay has solidified a bit too much. And when you're trying to reshape solidified clay, what happens? It just breaks, doesn't it? It just cracks. What can you do if it's got a bit too? Are there any parts of us that they've just hardened too much? Because the great thing is about being living clay is we can soften them again. God can soften them again. So that is an exercise for ourselves, really, where we go into a new season, a new chapter. Are we open to change? Are we open to it? We've got I know church has had a lot of change over the years since, COVID and everything like that. And, we'll probably see more change coming, different people come in, being involved, maybe things being done a different way, or changes across whatever. And the thing is, being open to that is really helpful. Because when we keep our eyes on the big picture, on the long-term vision, that hopefully that we want to see this place thrive, this church grow and thrive. Point 2 is renewed vision. Sometimes we need to just get that sense again, like, why are we here? What are we doing this for? And I know coming out of Bible college, I've shared with you before, that what it's like. You come out of Bible college and people sort of be like, oh, have you got a job lined up? Or where are you going? Where are you going to pastor? And there was this big sense of just giving up on the small towns in a way. It was this sense of just go to the cities. Because that's where the people are. Like, it makes sense naturally, doesn't it? Like, just go to the cities, okay? The small towns, they're a tough gig, the people might not even want you there. But for me, I just really want there to be thriving, and why not powerful churches in local towns with local people? Why not? Why can't we see that? And I just really have a heart for it, because that's exactly what we see in the Bible. Because Nazareth, I know I say this a lot, but I really believe it. And I think it's part of my core ministry in a way that, Nazareth was a very undesirable place. And it's not an accident that Jesus put himself there to be born. He said, in the lowest place on the entire earth, the place that people look down on the most, I am going to bring the most hope and the biggest victory that anyone has ever seen and will see. And it came from the very lowest place we can find. That's not an accident, is it? And that gives me a real confidence, because I know things are on his timing. And, I'd love to see things just go like that, but things are on his timing. But if we're in an area or a place externally or even internally in our heart where we're feeling low, we need to remind ourselves that it is in those lowest places where God can bring the highest victories. That is amazing, and that is a biblical principle. And, I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I really believe that God will do something absolutely outstanding in this area. I don't know what that looks like. I wish I knew the timeline, but I had that sense even from many years ago, a long time ago, even before I was pastoring, that I thought that I could just see God would do something very significant right here. And even in my natural mind, you're trying to talk it down. You're trying to, well, that doesn't make sense. You're thinking, why would that happen? But it's just this sense of, God can do something really significant right here. But I always felt there needs to be a receptive soil as well. A ground, a people that are going to grab hold of that and think, I don't know what it's going to look like, but God is going to change something in a powerful way, and it will come from right here. I don't know what that looks like, but God has put it there in the ground, but it takes people to be receptive to bring that. Does that make sense? And sometimes we have to grab hold of that, and to me, that is the long-term thing. So if we make some kind of change, or we do this or do that, it's usually never through a lens of, oh, we'll do that just for the sake of it, or to annoy this person or that person. It's through the lens of, but what could things look like in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years time? And I know that's a tough thing, because some of us, maybe we're making an investment that we don't get to harvest that ourselves. We don't get to reap that. But we're thinking, what will it be like for Judah, for Levi, Todd, Austin, the kids to come, the generations to come? What could that look like? Does that make sense? And it can be hard to have that sense of longevity. But Romans 12:2, it says this, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We know it, really famous scriptures. To be transformed by the renewing of our mind. This is a continual thing that we have to we go through it, because the world, it's not a neutral space, is it? We can often think, I'll just rest here, this will be my position, I'll rest here. But the world, it constantly tries to influence us. You notice that? Maybe more so than ever today, because we all do it. You pick up your phone, you maybe scroll on something, and you are being bombarded by things, by algorithms that are, they're controlled by other people. Right? It's like these algorithms are set in motion by other people who have a specific agenda, whether good or bad. And I'm just very aware of that. It's interesting, isn't it? But we are to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, not to be transformed by the doom scrolling of Monday morning, which we probably can all be guilty of. But is it renewing my mind? Is this transforming me? Am I looking at the big picture? Back to this one from Timothy. It says, I've run my race, now you run yours. We see this handing over, Paul handing over this not the reins necessarily, but Paul was taking a step back. He knew what was happening. He was approaching the end of his chapter, and he was trying to big up Timothy a little bit. And Timothy is an interesting one because apparently scholars say that he would come across, he was quite, meek, mild, and weak, and would maybe get sick quite a lot. But Paul is saying he is mighty, that he is a mighty man of God, and it is not based on what we see with our natural eyes, but what God is doing within. And again, it's that same pattern. Who does Jesus pick? The ones that are willing, which is point 3, just hands ready to serve. Theologically, we can all get into a lot of different debates or ideas about what the world should look like, or the times to come, or the end times, or things like that. And what I find interesting, though, is Paul says this. He simply says this, to do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. So I think, to me, what does that look like then? Just do the work of an evangelist. What does that look like to you if someone was to say that? Maybe we get more stereotypical views. We picture maybe someone on a street or something like that. But I think at its heart, it's just saying, just point people to Jesus. Whatever the season you're in, whatever the times we're in, just do the work of an evangelist. Just point people to Jesus. Because I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought I figured out a long time ago that it's not people that change people. From a Christian perspective, it's Jesus that changes people. Because I've grown up in the church world, and so I've experienced quite a lot, I guess, church-wise. I've had 30 odd years in the church, and you see things from different angles. You see churches that are trying to work with pressure, behavior modification, things like that, and you see churches that maybe it's a good thing, but there's a lot of discipline, and you see people debating back and forth, theological points, spiritual points, and what I tend to have found is that real, deep-rooted change, lasting change, it just comes from God. And we can spend a lot of time trying to change each other, trying to shape each other or mold each other into the way that we think we should be, but really, it's God that brings the change. So if we're struggling with something, if we're in a season of struggle, I know it sounds simple, sounds cliche, and we might not know exactly what that looks like, but we just have to come back to the foot of the cross every time. Just come back to Jesus. Say, God, okay, God, you're the potter, I'm the clay. So mold me, shape me, make me the ornament that you need right now. And because we're living clay, that thing can change. And in the seasons to come, God may reshape us and remold us into something else, repurpose us and give us this or give us that. And sometimes I think along the way, we just get stuck because we're used to doing one thing. And, I've seen this before, people talk about the good old days and I do it myself. I think, the good old days, for me, what's that, like 10 years ago? I don't know. But honestly, when you look back, sometimes maybe things were better, but we've always had problems. There've always been issues to work through. But when we live in the good old days, we miss what God is doing today. And we be thankful for the good old days, Be thankful for it. It's a hard one because I think, it's so amazing, the internet and everything we can do now. But I think back even to when I grew up, we didn't have smartphones. And I think for the kids today, I know it's a bit soon to be thinking about it or worrying about it, but I think, for my boys, what is that going to look like? Because I don't know if I would have wanted a smartphone in primary school or secondary school and the implications that come with that. How do we navigate this changing world safely in a healthy way? So, I can look back and think, I miss my good old days too. But spiritually speaking, for our church point of view, God will do something incredible. Maybe we had seasons in the past where we were happy or we had a better place, and we're in that in between. Because God needs to just remold us, reshape us a little bit. He needs to soften it up again. We have a season of softening, a season of reshaping, because he finds a new space for us on that shelf. New things come and things go, but he will make a new space for us. Sometimes we just have to think, where am I going to fit with this? God, where do I need to be reshaped or remolded into this new season? Because we know, we celebrate, God does not need perfect hands. He just needs available hands. What's that saying about there being, perfect churches? What's that saying? There are no perfect churches. And if there were one, if we went to it would no longer be perfect. You heard that? Because now we've just walked in, and I think that's not an insult. That's just, we're all in the same boat. We all can get things wrong. We can all make mistakes. But when we have a willing heart, a humble heart, a teachable heart, I just think that accomplishes so much more. That is the heart that carries us over mountains. That is the heart that takes us through the valley, over the mountains, into the new world waiting. So in this new season, just think, even practically, what is God stirring in your heart? How can you get more involved? Whether it's in church or something outside, how can you bring God's kingdom a little bit closer to earth? His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Because I really believe each one of us has something special. Pam's got something I don't have. Barry's got something I don't have. I've got something you don't have. We all have something. We are so unique, and I think we need to never forget that. Because we do, maybe it's a bit harsh, but we do live in a world now that does not view us as unique. That we are numbers, we are statistics, we are expendable, and that is not how God sees us, It just isn't. When he says he knows the number of hairs on your head, he is not lying. He knows you. And he's not made two of you. You are unique. It says, while you have a shot on this earth, do what only you can do through him. And each one of us have that. No one's ruled out. No one's excluded. The only people that exclude us really can be ourselves. Whether it's apathy or disinterest, or maybe we think the time has just gone. The time has not gone. The time is now. We're going to go into communion